welcome everyone. Appreciate you spending some time with us today as we cover our ServiceNow in-platform process mining solution. What we'll be doing here today is we'll do a quick why and what of process mining to level set on what it is and the value that it provides. We'll talk a little bit about the process for optimizing a workflow on the ServiceNow platform, and then we'll dive into a demonstration. The demonstration will be twofold. We'll look at how somebody would use what we call the process mining workspace to help them identify process inefficiencies and opportunities to improve. And then one of the things that we always like to show is how easy it is to get started with the solution. So we'll go and we'll create our first visualized process map in just a matter of minutes. It's one of the biggest benefits you get by using an in-platform process mining solution is the speed in which you can get this level of visibility. And a huge advantage for many of our customers is that as you'll see here today, you already have the skills that you need to get started with the solution. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with some resources to help you get started. And along the way, we'll answer your questions. As you think about your question, please put in the Q&A. I'll probably get through the slides, then check for questions before we go to the demonstration. And then after the demonstration, I'll check and answer questions again. This is the slide that says, hey, anything I say and do here today can't be held against me in the court of law. It is also the slide that says, hey, as part of this presentation, if we happen to make any forward-looking statements about things that might be coming on the ServiceNow platform, you should take them as forward-looking statements. Make no purchasing decisions based on them whatsoever, because they're always subject to change. And I'm assuming you've read the fine print. Now, I always like to start these sessions with this quote. Do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. And why I like the quote is it usually aligns to the reason that we've all gathered, right? To learn a little bit more about the ServiceNow platform, then take that knowledge, go back, apply it, and help us get more value out of our investment with ServiceNow. And it also aligns to the solution that we'll be talking about here today, process mining, which is designed to help us get a better understanding or x-ray the workflows that we have running us on the ServiceNow platform, and then start to show us where and how we could be doing better for everyone involved with them. Now, with everything we do, whether it be a webinar like this, a business process, or even a park, when we design things, we have a vision in our head for how they should play out. And we design for both completeness and for efficiency to provide the best experience possible for as many people as possible. So if we kind of take this park example, if we were designing a park, what we'd probably do is put in some paths for people to walk, bike, rollerblade on. We might put in some benches for people to sit on, read a book, or share a story with a friend. We may put in some grassy areas and for people to lay down picnic blankets on and have a lunch, or like my wife and I used to do when we lived in Manhattan, go play a game of Scrabble on a Saturday afternoon, where she kicked my butt week after week. So we designed to provide the best experience possible for as many people as possible. Now, unfortunately, what we designed isn't always what plays out in reality. And while this new reality might be more efficient for those people that are trying to get from point A to point B, it certainly doesn't have a positive impact on that experience my wife and I have when we go to play our game of Scrabble. Now, the same thing is true with our business processes. Designed for both completeness and efficiency to provide the best experience possible for as many people as possible. And then we roll them out and reality kicks in. And the reality is not all work is going to be flowing through the optimal path. And that's going to have a negative impact on the experience that both people requesting service are having, as well as the people that are trying to deliver that service. The challenge is seeing the reality of our business processes isn't always as easy and obvious as that park example. For most organizations, the continual improvement challenge is very manual, time-consuming, and costly. Usually involves running a whole bunch of reports, and then for some reason, people still like to print those reports out and go through them line by line with a highlighter. It may involve holding in-person or virtual workshops where we take a whole bunch of sticky notes and we put them up on a wall. And then somebody, of course, has to take a picture of those sticky notes on the wall because, like, hey, did work really happen unless we have a picture of sticky notes on a wall somewhere? It may involve bringing in some third-party consultants who are super helpful, but they're not free. And then once we get through all of that, we still have to get internal alignment on the optimal path forward. At the speed in which most organizations are trying to move these days, by the time we get through all that, the optimal path forward may have already likely changed. And this is where process mining comes in. Process mining accelerates our ability to start seeing the reality of what's going on. It automates the process of showing us where the bottlenecks are in our process, where there's unnecessary rework, where things are ping-ponging between teams. And now that we have this accelerated visibility into the reality, that speeds up our ability to make process changes to drive more efficiency through the organization, to get more productivity out of the people we have working in the organization. Now, some might say, wait a minute, Dan, we already have a whole bunch of dashboards inside of our organization that give us visibility into our processes. And we hope that you're using our in-platform reporting and analytics solution to answer very important questions like how many tickets, how many incidents, HR cases, customer service cases did we work? Which types of tickets, cases, incidents were they? And how long did it take to close them? And probably most importantly, how are we performing against our targets, and are we improving our cycle times? These are all super important questions, and we hope that you're using dashboards just like this to ask and answer those questions. But here's something that I've learned in my many years in the analytics and information space. Information tends to be one of the most addictive and contagious things out there. You give somebody a little bit and they always want more. So the first thing that happens when we get a dashboard like this out the door, before we can even high-five each other that we got the dashboard out the door, somebody in leadership is probably asking us questions like, well, why are we missing our CSAT or ESAT targets? Why are our closure times trending in the wrong direction? Like, why? And the answers to those follow-up why questions don't always live in dashboards like this. And this is where process mining can help. Process mining allows us to start asking and answering all those follow-up why questions to what we're seeing on our higher level dashboards, giving us visibility and the ability to answer questions like, where is the process getting stuck? Where is that unnecessary rework happening? Where are we spending or wasting the most time? Which vendors are speeding us up and which ones might be slowing us down? Or my favorite one, I've been asked for this report so many times over the years here at ServiceNow, I've actually given it a name. I like to call it the finger pointing report. Everybody wants to know who's holding on to the tickets the longest. I need to know who's holding on to the tickets the longest, or if you're a more glass half full person, we call that the opportunity to improve report. These are all the types of questions that process mining allows us to start asking and answering. And we can apply process mining to a single table process like this incident example here, where we're looking at how incidents are moving from state to state in the process and the volume and velocity it's taking to make those transitions. Or if we're using ServiceNow for a more robust workflow, let's say like an HR onboarding case, where you have a high-level onboarding case, a whole bunch of activity sets, and a bunch of subtasks that are coming off of that to complete the onboarding process. We can use something we call a multi-dimensional map to give us end-to-end visibility into where the bottlenecks might be into that process, in that larger process. This multi-dimensional view is very, very handy when you start to try to analyze service requests inside of the ServiceNow platform. If you think about the primary bottlenecks that exist within the request process, there's really two. One is that approval step where things are being held up waiting to be approved. And then there's obviously the time spent in the fulfillment tasks themselves. Well, in ServiceNow, those two things live in two different tables. So being able to look at the approval step as well as the fulfillment tasks side by side really helps to get an understanding of where the time is being leaked in the process and where we potentially could reclaim some of that time and speed things up and drive more productivity in the organization. And then lastly, as of our Vancouver release, which is now we're in Washington. So currently what you have the ability to do with ServiceNow is we open process mining up to import external process data. So if you have a workflow or a business process that's running outside of the ServiceNow platform and you want to take advantage of this process mining solution, you can import that external process data and apply process mining to it. So the example that you're looking at on the screen here happens to be some data that we pulled from our Smart Recruiter system that we use for hiring. And we can start to look at how things are moving through the hiring process and where the bottlenecks might be. All right, last thing before we jump over to the demonstration piece. So now that we understand what process mining is and the type of visibility it gets and why that's important, I always like to just touch on the advantage you have by having process mining in the platform and how that helps us create a more closed loop continual improvement experience for our organizations. If you think about it, improving a process, there's really four phases, right? Detect, analyze, improve, and monitor. I mean, we have all those on one platform now. So if you think about detecting, there's things on the ServiceNow platform that help us understand when things aren't going according to plan. whether it be notifications, let's say on an SLA breach, or probably more appropriately from a continual improvement perspective, notifications when one of our performance analytics KPIs hits a target or a threshold that we set for ourselves. Those are things that help us understand that things aren't going according to plan. But when that happens, we need to dig in, analyze, and understand why that's happening and how we potentially could improve. And that's where process mining fits in the puzzle, right? Process mining gives us things like visualized process maps, bottleneck, root cause, variation analysis, and a connection with something we call automation discovery to help us dig in and understand why these things are happening and how we potentially could improve. And then once we understand why and how, there's no shortage of ways to make improvements on the ServiceNow platform. For example, let's say that process mining shines a light on an intake challenge that we're having, where we're going back and forth to the user for additional information multiple times. Perhaps we improve that intake experience with the virtual agent conversation. Maybe process mining is going to shine a light on situations where we have things bouncing between teams before they get to their final resting place, and that's slowing us down. Perhaps we can use predictive or task intelligence to automate the process of getting those things to the right place the first time, streamlining its path to closure. Sometimes process mining shines a light on situations when we have things, somebody swivel chairing data from one system to another, and we can use automation engine and our integration hub to automate, or maybe even an RPA bot to automate away that swivel chairing and streamline the process. Sometimes, and I'm sure the ServiceNow gods will strike me down with lightning right now for saying this, sometimes the fix isn't an automation. It's just a human thing we should stop doing. So for example, I had one customer who had 2 levels of approval on printer toner requests. And that second level of approval was adding 3 days to the closure time. Like, did we really need 2 levels of approval on printer toner requests? They thought not. Remove that second level of approval and voila, the process is now magically running 3 days faster. So no shortage of ways to improve. And then the last bucket, this monitor bucket, is a really important one. When you start using process mining, there's going to be no shortage of improvement opportunities presented to you. The challenge is going to be that you're not going to be able to act on them all at once. So there's applications on the platform like Continual Improvement Management and Automation Center, and their purpose in life is to help us capture, track, and prioritize these improvement opportunities so they don't get lost in the shuffle. And having those things in place, making sure that we're capturing these things, and it helps hold people in the organization accountable to doing the follow-up work. Analytics and analysis is great, but you don't recognize any value unless you actually follow up and act on the things that the data is telling you to act on. So it's really important that we close the loop with these applications, right? And now that we have all of these things in one place, we can make continual improvement something that's more routine inside of our organizations. Today, for many organizations, continual improvement, or with other solutions out there, it's more of a once or twice a year type of science project, right? You do all this analysis in Excel and you spend months accessing data and crunching data and putting it into an Excel spreadsheet that you turn into a PowerPoint that you go tell you, then you present that PowerPoint at a lunch. And that's where the insights die. That's not the way it should work. We should be constantly looking at these improvement opportunities, constantly looking at our process data, and constantly making tweaks to our process to continually improve over time. All right, so that's the quick intro and overview. I'm going to jump to a demonstration, but I'm just going to check the Q&A real quick to see if there's any questions that I can address now, or potentially I see if there's things that I will be addressing moving forward. So there is a question about which release is process mining available in. Process mining was actually released in Quebec, our Quebec release, which is probably maybe a little over 2 years old now, 2 years ago. So from Quebec onward, process mining is available. Prior to the Vancouver release, though, we called it process optimization. So there was a rename in Vancouver to process mining, but it's been around for a little while. So if you're running anything above Quebec, you're good to go with process mining, or it is available to you to obtain. Got it. So somebody's asking a question about that external data offering, or the ability to mine data outside of the ServiceNow platform. The way that process mining works, it requires audit level data, so information about what's changing. There's really 3 primary data points that you need to do anything in process mining. One is a unique identifier for the record, whether it be a job requisition, like we looked in that hiring example, an incident ID, a claim ID, a unique identifier for some piece of work that's moving through the process. Then you need what is known as an activity. What is the thing that's changing about that record over time? And then you need a timestamp. If you have those three pieces of data, you can provide or generate a process map. Beautiful thing about ServiceNow processes is we capture all that data inside of our audit logs, so it's a streamlined process to getting you this level of visibility. For processes outside of ServiceNow, if you can extract that data and import it into ServiceNow, you have the ability to apply process mining to that. Licensing. Process mining comes in a number of different flavors. You can acquire it via ITSM or customer service enterprise bundles. So it comes bundled with that, but then there's also individual SKUs. So if you're at a professional level, you can attach process mining to your entitlement, whether it be ITSM, customer service management, any of the industry workflows, HR, lifecycle events, strategic portfolio management. If you built custom applications on the platform, you can apply process mining to that, and that external data offering we talked about, field service management. So a number of different ways that you can get entitlement to process mining. So if you're at the pro level, there's something that you would need to add on top of that. Those are good. So we got a number of questions out of the way, and we'll plug along here. We'll do a little bit of demonstration. If I didn't get to your question, it's likely that I'm going to cover it later in the presentation, or I have slides for it. But just keep putting those questions in there. We'll make sure we get them answered. Now, for me, I always like to start these demonstrations inside of a dashboard. You do not need to be using performance analytics to take advantage of process mining, but they are very complementary solutions. So you might have a dashboard like this, where perhaps you see, let's say your resolution times are trending in the wrong direction, or your first call resolution rate is trending in the wrong direction, and you want to get an understanding of why that might be happening. Right from there, you'd be able to drill down into the process mining workspace to get a better understanding of why that might be happening and where there might be opportunities to improve. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a little bit of a harbor tour of what you've got inside of this workspace, so you get an understanding of kind of how you would use it to identify inefficiencies. So what we've done here is we've mined 22,000 incidents, and those 22,000 incidents have taken 1,500 different days to closure, 1,500 different routes, to get to closure. And the first thing that you'll see on the summary and insights page is you'll see some key performance indicators. For the workflows that we have on the platform, we package up what we call content packs that you can install to help get you some of these KPIs and jumpstart you on your process mining journey. But you can, of course, create your own dashboards and KPIs and link them to your process mining projects. The point is that you want to make sure you keep the person that's doing the analysis aligned to the higher level goals that we're trying to achieve. Now, as we move down this screen on the summary and insights page, we get to what is my favorite part of the solution. Everybody gets so focused on those process maps, and they're very powerful, and we're going to look at those in a second. But these improvement opportunities are things that help call out opportunities to improve right up front for you before you even get to the map. These also come as part of those content packs, and again, you can create your own. And the idea here, right, if we look at this, is these improvement opportunities come in two flavors, both rule-based and automated. So an example of a rule-based improvement opportunity would be these. We've identified 8,400, or 38% of our incidents that we mined go into the state of awaiting caller info at least once in their life cycle. And probably the most important number here is this 43 years. There's 43 years worth of productivity time packaged up in just those 8,400 incidents going in and out of the awaiting caller info state. Like, even if we could reclaim 1% of that 43 years, that's going to be a win for us from an organizational perspective. Now, that's an example of a rule-based finding. And why do I say that? Because we specifically said, go find us tickets, or incidents in this case, that go into the state of awaiting caller info. The next example on the list here is one of the more automated ones, in which we're looking just for patterns, process patterns in the data. And these automated findings or improvement opportunities come in a number of different flavors, one being rework. So in this case here, we identified 2,000 incidents that had rework on the in progress step, meaning that an incident went into in progress, left that state, and went back to in progress later in the process. So it looks for things that are going A, B, C, back to A in the process and flags them for us. And then right from here, we could drill into the visualized process map for just those 2,000 incidents that have rework on the in progress step. So we have these automated improvement opportunities for things like rework, as I mentioned, A, B, C, A. We have them for ping-ponging tickets, so things that are going A, B, A, B, A, B in the process. We have something called an extra step detector, where it goes out and it says, hey, I identified a process variant that goes A, B, C, D, F, and another variant that's going A, B, C, D, E, F, and it flags that. So in this case here, it found these 434, in which awaiting caller info is an additional step between in progress and resolved. So these are things that are very helpful for those situations where we don't know what we don't know, and we just want the solution to start identifying patterns and opportunities for us. Why I like these so much is they kind of remind me of when I was playing hide and seek as a kid. Like when I was playing hide and seek at home, I had a home field advantage. I knew the 2 or 3 best hiding spots. So when I was way more efficient at finding my friends than they were at finding me. The same is true with many of our customers. Many of our customers have a pretty good idea where their process inefficiencies are. They just haven't had a good way to get the data they need to quantify the impact, so they know how to prioritize which ones to act on first. Right? As I was mentioned earlier, no shortage of opportunities. You just can't work on them all at once. You want to have some data to help guide you into where you should be focusing your efforts first. All right, so a lot of power right here on that summary and insights page. And then of course, we can get over to the visualized process map itself to continue that conversation with the data. So I'm going to give you again, a little bit of a harbor tour of what we're looking at here. First thing, again, we've got our same 22,000 incidents and our same 1,500 routes. And you might be saying to yourself, Dan, that doesn't look like 1,500 routes. And that's because by default, we just show you the top 20%. But if I wanted to, I can expand this out and the processes can get really messy, really fast. And your governance, risk, and compliance people, when they start to see all these different lines, they start to get a little scared because there's a lot of risk potential inside of all those different routes. I'm going to bring it back to something just a little bit more manageable here and zoom in on this. Now, what you're looking at here in this example is we're looking at how the incidents are moving from state to state in the process. So in this case here, I start to see that I have these 3,500 that took on average 14 hours to go from the state of new to in progress. I'm going to show you an example later on where we're looking at how things are moving from group to group in the process. Now, for me, first time I saw one of these, I had no idea what I was looking at. But they kind of reminded me of ski trails. And if I think back to when I was skiing, I don't ski anymore, but when I used to ski, anytime I started going down the mountain and then had to go back up the mountain for any reason, certainly wasn't the best experience for me. Definitely wasn't the fastest way to get down the mountain. So I always start to look for these lines that are going back up the hill because they represent some form of rework in the process. And of course, rework is going to slow us down. So in this example here, I've identified incidents that are going from the state of awaiting caller info back to the state of in progress. In fact, there's 2,600 unique occurrences of that happening within this set of data that we're mining, and 3,300 total occurrences, meaning there's about 700 incidents that potentially took this trip more than once. In fact, one incident took this trip 9 times, and probably most importantly, on average, it's taking 2 days to make this trip. And I've done this demonstration before, so I know that the math here, that's 19 years worth of time packaged up and things just going from awaiting caller info back to in progress. And what's crazy about that is that things don't start out in awaiting caller info. They have to get there in the first place. So there's even more time that we can potentially reclaim. So what I can do is I can use this bottleneck analysis to look at all the situations in which awaiting caller info is a step in the process. And I can find this transition that we were just looking at, awaiting caller info to in progress. And there's that 19 years that I was just talking about. And then here's the other half of that journey, in progress to awaiting caller info. And there's 22 years there. So 41 years of time packaged up in just these 2 transitions. Again, like I mentioned earlier, even a small reclamation of, let's say, 1% is going to be a win for us. So what do we do next? Well, maybe we just want to focus in on those tickets that touch awaiting caller info at some point in their life cycle. So I can narrow it down and look at this. We get to that 8,406. If you remember back to the summary and insights page, that was the first one on the list, right? So we could have just jumped right to this piece, but I wanted you to see a little bit of the functionality you have to start narrowing the data down. And now that I've narrowed it down to just those 8,400 incidents that are touching the state of awaiting caller info at some point in their life cycle, what can we do? Well, maybe now we want to start using our breakdowns over here on the left-hand side of the screen to start slicing and dicing these 8,400 and understanding where, from a contextual perspective, there might be some ways to narrow the data down a little bit more. We can do it by category, assignment group, priority. Any way that you structure the data in the platform, you can start to use to narrow this data set down. I always like to start with channel, especially when we're talking about awaiting caller info, because if I can improve the intake experience, potentially we don't need to go back and forth to the user as much. So what I see here is that the majority of these tickets that are going into awaiting caller info are coming in via self-service and portal. But look at this third channel on the list, or source or contact type, whatever you call it in your organization. Email. I've got these 1,300 that come in via email, but look at this. On average, they're taking a whole week longer than those other two channels. So maybe I want to focus in there. And it kind of makes sense, right? Emails are pretty unstructured channels, so you'd expect a little bit of back and forth and take a little bit longer, but a whole extra week, we got to be able to do it better than that. So here we've narrowed it down to those 1,300 that come in via email and go into awaiting caller info. So what do we do next? Well, I can use this histogram to maybe focus in on just the incidents that go into awaiting caller info 2, 3, 4, or 5 times. Because we're in the platform, we have this tremendous advantage that we can drill down to the detailed records and start digging into them, of course, if we have the rights to do so. We respect all your security. And then if you remember, earlier I said information is one of those addictive and contagious things. Now I can just start using the platform to continue this conversation with the data. In a single click, I can take these 1,300, turn it into an interactive dashboard using something called interactive analysis to help me start get a better understanding of these 1,300 incidents that came in via email and went into awaiting caller info. Just a little piece that you can use in the platform to help you narrow it down further. Or maybe we want to start taking advantage of some of the machine learning on the platform, and I can use this cluster analysis to help me harvest some of the gold and value that's in that unstructured data, like the short descriptions and the descriptions. And what I can see here is I have this cluster of incidents that came in via email, went into awaiting caller info, that are just people trying to update their email address in their profile. That totally seems like something I should have a catalog item for, a virtual agent conversation, some form of self-service. And you know what? Even if I do have that, maybe I just need to market those things a little bit better so I don't have people sending in emails about it. So now that I've identified that opportunity, what do we do next? Well, we want to close the loop. So a couple of things we can do. We can come over here and say at able, maybe take a look at intake experience for email update, attach a snapshot, hit post. This is going to send Abel a notification. Abel's going to click on the link. It's going to bring him right into this project. He's going to hit preview. It'll take him to the same exact place in the analysis that I was, so he can continue to dig further. Or I potentially could start to use Continual Improvement Management or Automation Center, right, to create or link to existing initiatives and make sure that we capture this insight and this opportunity, ensure that it gets tracked, prioritized, and followed up on. So right here within the workbench, we link the two things together just to close that loop, right? That's one of the biggest things or advantages, right, is the ability to link together with other parts of the platform to make sure that the work gets done, right? No value in just the analysis itself. It has to be acted upon. All right, a couple of other things that I like to show. I know I just dropped a lot on you, but I want you to see these other things inside of here as well. One of the most useful features that you have inside of this process mining workspace is this ability to do side-by-side comparison. So if I want to come in here and maybe I want to start looking at how two different regions are comparing to each other for doing similar work, or two different lines of business, or as you start to use this more, you start to schedule these projects. Maybe you want to look at this month versus last month, or before a process change and after a process change to see if there's any adverse effects. You can start doing this side-by-side analysis, a very common way to use the solution. And then the last example that I like to show is my favorite one. And I like this one because this is the finger pointing report that I've been asked for so many times over the years. And I love that I now have the ability to give customers the ability to actually ask and answer that question of who's holding on to the tickets the longest. So I'm going to show you how that works. So in this case here, what we've done in this case is we've decided to focus in on assignment group handoffs rather than state transfers. And you'll notice that I've got some different improvement opportunities because we're using assignment group as our activity this time. And then when I jump over to the map is going to look a little bit different as well. Same capabilities, but now instead of looking at the volume and velocity of tickets going from state to state, I'm now zooming in and focusing on how tickets are moving from team to team. So I can see the volume and the velocity here. And what I'd want to be able to do is look for those multi-hop situations in which I can maybe reduce the hops or reclaim some of that time. And to do that, I can use my variation analysis. And what variation analysis allows us to do is look at all the different routes that these incidents are taking to get to closure. And I can say something like, hey, only show me the routes in which there's multiple steps involved or multiple hops. So steps is greater than, in my case, 4. And then, you know what? I want a little bit of meat on the bone. I don't want the onesie twosie. So go find me situations in which there's multi-hop and there's more than 10 situations in which that happened, and hit apply. So now it'll narrow it down to just those multi-hop situations in which there's more than 10 tickets that went through that same scenario. And I can see I have these 26 here that are going from IT Support Americas to Support IT back to IT Support Americas. And I can see that on average, it's taking 1 month for the incidents to make that journey. But in there, like, who's holding on to the tickets the longest? So what I can do is I can focus in on these 26. And I can see that the incidents go in, they go to IT Support Americas. Then they hang on to it for about a day before they transfer it over to Support IT. And then on average, Support IT is hanging on to it for 4 weeks before they pass it back to IT Support Americas. So I now know who's holding on to the tickets the longest. If I wanted to, I can get to the detailed records and dig into these. But it's a very common problem. And what we can look at is, hey, do these tickets need to go to Support IT? And if they do, why do we have to go to IT Support Americas first? Can we just bypass that and get to there? Why do they spend the time to transfer it back to them? Can we just end the life cycle there and reclaim some of that time? Maybe there's a training opportunity here. So just lots of opportunity, but just getting this level of visibility is really, really important to start reclaiming some of that productivity time for the organization. So many other examples I can show you, but at this point, what I like to do is I like to kind of dive in and say, let's focus in on, like, what does it take to get started with this? Like, how can we get going? Well, let's create our first project. And this is where I usually like to joke that if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball, or if you can build a ServiceNow report, you can visualize your processes in a matter of minutes. So let's just call this one Tech Talk. And I'm going to add a dashboard here. Again, we're going to give you some of these out of the box, or you can create your own. We'll just add one for the project itself, and we'll hit save. Now, the first thing that we need to do is we need to choose which data do we want to mine. And any data, or any table that has auditing turned on is going to be available to us. So we can come in here. We'll say incident. That's where my best demo data is. Incident. We'll choose our data from our list, or table from our list. If you don't see a table that you want to mine in this list, it's likely that auditing is not turned on for it. And then we just start scoping it, narrowing the data set down. We always guide customers to focus in on work that has completed the process. So the best way to do that is actives closed. And then we can start to say, maybe I only care about a certain category or assignment groups incidents. Maybe I want to just look at the last month or the last quarter, right? You just narrow the data set down. In my case, I don't need to do a lot of narrowing because I've got a limited set of data inside of here, and we're not trying to ask and answer a specific question. Now, once we've done that, the only other thing you absolutely have to do is you need to choose an activity. What is the thing that is changing on the records over time that we want to use to look for bottlenecks or opportunities to improve? Very often, we just start out with looking at how things are moving from state to state. But as you just saw, a very powerful and common example is to use assignment group as your activity. And you can combine 2 of these activities in the same map if you wanted to. So we could be done now, but of course you're going to want those handy dandy breakdowns on the left-hand side of the screen to allow you to start slicing and dicing these projects. So we can come in here and maybe I'll just add category as a breakdown. You might want to use assignment group, priority, resolution code. You can have up to 10 breakdowns per project. And we'll just stop at 1 for purposes of time here today. And then what we'll do is we'll go to our project definition. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to import those finding templates. Remember those improvement opportunities we saw on the dashboard, things that go into a waiting caller info or rework, extra steps, ping pong detectors. We'll just import those from the content pack so we have them available to us. And at this point, we're done. We hit generate models. And what this is going to do, it's going to go out, it's going to harvest the relevant audit log data based on the criteria that we put in, passes that information off to the machine learning infrastructure to do the heavy duty number crunching, to eliminate any of the any sort of performance implications on the instance itself. It then spits that finished model back into the instance, and away we go. So this usually takes anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple of minutes, depending on the volume of data that we're trying to mine and our place in line with that machine learning infrastructure. But that's it. That's what it takes. And this is one of the things that gets our customers so excited about what process mining can do for them, because most of our customers, based on what you just saw, already have the skills they need in-house to get started with this solution, to get started right away, and start getting better insights into how their process is performing and where the opportunities to improve might be. The real work with the solution is really just using the solution to dig into your data and identify where the opportunity is. It's not the creation of the projects themselves. And then there's the work of actually acting upon the improvement opportunities that the data is showing us and finding for us. Almost there, and now we're done. So we can hit Open Analyst Workbench. And there's our tech talk. We're going to have our dashboard, our improvement opportunities that came based on the content packs, and then our map itself. That's it. And that's what it takes. All right, go back over to the slides. So I saw some questions earlier about kind of what other customers are using this and how are they doing it. I can't use names, but just to give you some examples, some of the initial things that we've seen customers. I had one customer, a large bank. With the first week they turned this on, they identified a situation in which they had an automation that was failing over 2,200 times a month. And when that automation failed, it would create a manual task that somebody had to follow up on. All this automation was doing was putting people into Active Directory groups, but what they identified is that the failure is being caused because the form allowed people to try to do cross-domain type of putting people in from one domain in a group in another domain. It was failing for that reason. Simply changing the form allowed them to reclaim 7 years of productivity time per month. But they found that opportunity using process mining. And then, the nice thing about that example, or what I like about that example, is that the person who shared it with me, they said, Dan, what was great about that is it was like a double inefficiency we solved, because not only were we creating these manual tasks that people had to work, people were calling the service desk to check the status of those manual tasks. So we eliminated 2 inefficiencies simply by changing a form. Another example was we had a customer that identified that a third of the ticket time was just waiting for things to be assigned. So we lost it. It was a 3-day closure time on average for a certain type of ticket. A third of that time, a whole day, was the ticket sitting in new to assigned state. And they were not using any sort of assignment rules. So they've implemented a round robin assignment rule, and they estimate that's going to save them 400 days per year. So lots of different opportunities, lots of savings. I mean, the time adds up, right? Sometimes we look at and we say, well, it's just a couple of hundred of these incidents or cases or whatever it might be here or there. But all of those things add up over time. What process mining is really good at is showing you where you have all of the different leaks in your tires, where you're leaking productivity time, and then giving you the data you need to prioritize which leaks are the biggest and which ones you should plug first. I think I've already mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the question about like, hey, where can I apply process mining? Well, if you're using ITSM, it's available for ITSM. If you're using on any of our customer or industry workflows, you can apply process mining to those. HR case and lifecycle events, process mining is available there. Field service management, strategic portfolio management, if you've built custom applications with App Engine and Creator Workflows, and I've already mentioned that external data piece. So lots of coverage on the platform for process mining. Now, above and beyond today, like if you like what you saw and you're like, I really want to learn more about that, well, there's no shortage of opportunities to learn more about process mining out there on the internet. We do have a self-paced on-demand training called Process Mining Essentials on the Now Learning site that's available to you. One of the best assets we have out there is a great white paper based on our experience with process mining here at ServiceNow. It details kind of how we approach process mining from a programmatic perspective here at the company. It also walks through some of our initial findings, like 5 or 6 of the initial use cases and kind of what we found and then how we acted on them and some of those savings that we recognize based on those actions. There is a community forum focused just for process mining, so a product hub. There's tons of resources, recordings out there that you can take advantage of. If you have questions, that we don't get to answer today and you want to get them answered, post them on that community site. Our team checks that site multiple times a day and responds very, very quickly. One of the assets that you'll find on that site is something we call the Process Mining Academy. So we host a monthly webinar series in which we do deep dives into different areas of process mining. We have a whole session specifically on process mining for field service management or strategic portfolio management. Or we have a whole session just on that external data offering, or a session on how do you create and use those automated findings, or how to embed a process mining map in one of the dashboards that you're creating. So there's over 20 plus Academy sessions recorded and posted out there. So check those out. We also have something we call the use case series. One of the things that we've recognized is that process mining is a new muscle for a lot of our customers. And just like when you're learning a new exercise routine, or a new type of stretch or something like that, it's very helpful to have a little video to show you how to do it. So what we've created is this library of little short 5-minute or less videos that show you how to use process mining for very specific use cases, like how do I use process mining to do SLA breach analysis, or how do I use process mining to look for work that's taking longer to route than resolve, or how do I use process mining to identify approval bottlenecks in a request process. So this use case series, these short little videos that show you how to use process mining, it's great for getting ideas on where to apply process mining and then also how to act on that. And then there's a number of different live and now sessions out there that walk through how you can get started with process mining. I actually just did another live on now session today about what's new in Washington for DC release for process mining. So a number of other sessions out there if you look in the live on now section for process mining. All right. I think I want to just open it up for questions one more time. So if you've got questions, I'm going to check the Q&A, but if you thought of questions throughout the session and you've not put them in there, now's the time to put them in there. And just looking at the list of questions, we covered some of the use cases already. So I think we're good. Does anybody have any other questions that they want to get in here? Now is the time to put them in the Q&A. There is a question here, what release is this available from? I think I might have addressed that already, but if I didn't, process mining has been available since the Quebec release, so over 2 years. And I think I might have mentioned earlier that it was originally called process optimization, so you may be more familiar with it with that name, but as of Vancouver, we've changed it to be process mining. So somebody's asking about how to get this or work with this with their account. I would just reach out to your account team and their that you work with, and they'll be able to help connect you with the right people here at ServiceNow to work on a demonstration and potentially a proof of value if necessary with that customer. A question around availability inside of FedRAMP. Yes, it's FedRAMP approved, certified. Also for those customers out there that might be in an on-prem environment. We also process mining is available in those environments as well. If I don't answer it, we'll follow up with the correct answer. So we started with a quote. I always like to end with a quote. To improve is to change, to be perfect is to change often. And I like this quote because what you saw here today is now with this ability to have with the visibility that process mining provides, it is going to give us that ability to make changes within our organization at a more frequent nature and an accelerated pace. And that allows us to continue to get better and to kind of get close to perfect. We'll never get all the way there, but we'll be able to get closer to that. With that, I'll just say thank you. Appreciate your time here today. And if you've got questions, please post them in the community site for process mining on the community site, and we'll make sure that we answer those for you. And if you want deeper dive into any area, just reach out to your ServiceNow account team and they'll get you in touch with the right resources.